The snow was coming down harder than I had seen in years when I heard the sharp knock on my front door that February afternoon in Bozeman, Montana. And little did I know that answering it would lead to the most bizarre confrontation of my entire life. I set down my coffee mug and walked over to the door, pulling it open to find Patricia Hendricks standing on my porch with her arms crossed. Her face twisted into that familiar expression of self-righteous indignation that I had come to recognize from our monthly HOA meetings. Patricia was the vice president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, and she took her duties more seriously than most people took their actual jobs. "Oliver Sanders," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I need to use your snowmobile." I blinked at her, snow swirling past her shoulder into my warm entryway. "Excuse me, your snowmobile. That loud machine you keep in your garage. I need it for a few hours." She said this as if she were asking me to pass the salt at dinner, like it was the most reasonable request in the world. "Patricia, I cannot just lend you my snowmobile. Do you even know how to operate one? How hard can it be? You just turn it on and go, right?" She waved her hand dismissively, and I noticed her perfectly manicured nails were painted bright red. "I need to get to the grocery store. My Range Rover cannot handle these roads." I almost laughed, but the look on her face told me she was deadly serious. "The roads are closed, Patricia. That is why the plows have not been through yet. Nobody is supposed to be out there unless it is an emergency." "This is an emergency," she snapped. "I am completely out of my organic almond milk, and the store is having a sale on imported cheese that ends today. I refuse to miss it." I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process what I was hearing. Outside, the snow continued to fall in thick, heavy flakes, already accumulating another 2 inches on top of the foot we had gotten overnight. The wind was howling something fierce, and visibility was maybe 20 feet at best. "Patricia, that is not an emergency. That is a shopping trip." "Nobody is going anywhere in this weather." Her eyes narrowed. "As vice president of this HOA, I am reminding you that Section 7, Article 3 of our bylaws states that all residents must be good neighbors and assist one another in times of need. That is for actual emergencies, not cheese sales. I determine what constitutes an emergency in this neighborhood," she said, her voice rising. "And I am telling you that I need your snowmobile. Now, are you going to be a team player, or do I need to report this refusal to the board?" I felt my jaw tighten. This was typical Patricia. Everything was about control, about getting her way, about wielding whatever tiny bit of authority she had over everyone else. I had dealt with her nonsense for 3 years now, ever since I bought this house in the subdivision, and I was getting tired of it. "You can report whatever you want, Patricia. I am not lending you my snowmobile. It is dangerous out there, you do not know how to drive it, and your shopping trip is not worth risking your life over." Her face flushed red. "We will see about this, Oliver. We will absolutely see about this." She turned on her heel and marched back down my driveway, nearly slipping twice on the ice before reaching the sidewalk. I watched her go, shaking my head in disbelief, then closed the door and returned to my coffee. What Patricia did not know, what she apparently had never bothered to figure out despite living 3 houses down from me for the past 3 years, was that I was not just some random guy with a snowmobile. I was the rural postal carrier for this entire area, and her precious mail, her packages, her letters, every single piece of correspondence she received came through me. I had been delivering to Meadowbrook Hills since I transferred here from Missoula 5 years ago, and I knew every house, every resident, every mailbox in a 10-mile radius. The irony was not lost on me that she was always the first person to complain if her mail was even an hour late. I finished my coffee and checked my phone. The Postal Service had already sent out the notification that delivery would be suspended for the day due to the blizzard conditions. This was a Level 3 snow emergency, which meant only essential personnel were allowed on the roads, and even we were being told to stay put until the worst of it passed. My snowmobile was not for grocery runs or cheese sales. It was for emergencies, for checking on elderly residents who might need help, for getting to the post office if absolutely necessary. I kept it maintained and ready because, in Montana winters, you never knew when you might need it to save someone's life. The storm raged on through the afternoon. I kept myself busy inside, catching up on some reading and watching the news. The meteorologists were calling it one of the worst February blizzards in 2 decades. The governor had declared a state of emergency for the entire county, and the National Guard was on standby in case they needed to do rescues. Around 5 in the evening, my phone rang. It was Dennis Carlton, the president of our HOA and generally a reasonable guy when Patricia was not in his ear. "Oliver, hey, sorry to bother you during the storm." "No problem, Dennis. What is up?" "I just got off the phone with Patricia. She is pretty upset about something that happened earlier today." I sighed. "Let me guess, the snowmobile thing?" "Yeah. She wants to call an emergency board meeting to discuss your refusal to help a neighbor in need. I tried to tell her that it could wait until after the storm, but she is insisting." "Dennis, she wanted to borrow my snowmobile to go buy cheese, in a blizzard, with zero experience operating one." There was a pause. Cheese, and almond milk. Another pause, longer this time. "Oliver, between you and me, I think Patricia sometimes forgets what actual emergencies look like, but you know how she gets. She is already drafting a formal complaint. Let her draft whatever she wants. I am not risking my equipment or her safety for a shopping trip." "I hear you, I really do. Just wanted to give you a heads up that this probably is not over." "Thanks, Dennis, I appreciate it." We hung up and I shook my head. This was absolutely ridiculous. But that was life in an HOA, especially one where Patricia Hendricks had any authority. She had been pushing her weight around since she got elected to the board 2 years ago, finding violations where none existed, making up rules on the fly, and generally making everyone's life more difficult than it needed to be. The next morning, I woke up to an eerie silence. The wind had finally stopped, and when I looked outside, I saw a winter wonderland. The storm had dumped nearly 2 feet of snow on top of what we already had, and the whole neighborhood looked like it had been wrapped in a white blanket. I got dressed in my thermal gear and headed out to my garage. My snowmobile, a reliable Polaris that I had owned for 4 years, started up on the first try. I let it warm up while I checked my phone. The Postal Service was still suspended for regular delivery, but we had been given clearance to do wellness checks and deliver any emergency medication if needed. I strapped my postal bag across my chest, even though I was not carrying regular mail, and headed out into the neighborhood. The streets were completely impassable for cars. Snow was piled up past the curbs, and the plows would not make it through until at least this afternoon. I made my way through the subdivision, checking on the elderly residents first. Mrs. Morrison on Elk Ridge Drive was fine, had plenty of food, and her heat was working. The Johnsons on Aspen Court were good too, though they needed me to help them shovel out their front door. I spent the next hour making my rounds, making sure everyone was safe and had what they needed. Then I got to Patricia's house. Her Range Rover was buried in her driveway, just the top visible above the snow. I could see lights on inside, so I knew she was home. I had a package for her that had been marked as containing medication, so despite my feelings about yesterday's encounter, I needed to make sure she got it. I pulled up to her walkway and killed the engine. Before I could even get to her door, it swung open and Patricia came storming out, still in her bathrobe and slippers. "You have some nerve showing up here after yesterday," she yelled over the sound of the wind. "I have a package for you, Patricia. It is marked as medication." She stopped short, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. "What are you talking about?" I held up the package. "Your prescription from the pharmacy. It came through yesterday before the storm hit." "Why do you have my medication? Where is the regular mail carrier?" And there it was. The moment of realization that was about to make this whole ridiculous situation even more absurd. "I am the regular mail carrier, Patricia. I have been delivering your mail for the past 5 years. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. You work for the post office." "I am the rural carrier for this entire area. Every piece of mail you have received since you moved here has come through me." I walked forward and handed her the package. "You need to sign for this." She took the package mechanically, staring at it like she had never seen a cardboard box before. "But I thought you were just some guy who worked from home or something." "Nope. I am a federal employee, United States Postal Service. Been doing this for 15 years, the last 5 right here in Meadowbrook Hills." I pulled out my electronic signature device. "I need your signature." She signed without looking, her eyes still wide. "I had no idea." "Most people do not pay attention to their mail carrier," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But yeah, that is me. Every day, rain or shine or apparently blizzard, I am the one making sure you get your packages, your letters, your magazines, all of it. I always see the postal truck, but I never realized it was you driving it. Well, now you know." I took back the device and secured it in my bag. "Is there anything else you need? Any other emergencies?" She flushed red again, but this time it looked more like embarrassment than anger. "No, I am fine. Good, stay inside and stay warm. The roads should be clear by tomorrow." I turned to leave, but she called out after me. "Oliver, wait." I looked back. She was hugging the package to her chest, and for the first time since I had known her, she actually looked uncomfortable. "I may have overreacted yesterday," she said quietly. "About the snowmobile. I did overreact." She looked down at her slippers, which were now soaked through with snow. "I was just frustrated about being stuck here and I took it out on you. That was not fair." I considered her for a moment. This was probably the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from Patricia Hendricks, and part of me wanted to just accept it and move on. But another part of me, the part that was tired of her constant power plays and manufactured emergencies, wanted her to really understand how absurd she had been. "Patricia, you wanted to risk your life, my equipment, and potentially cause me to lose my job if something had happened to you. Also, you could buy cheese on sale. Do you understand how that sounds?" "Yes," she said, and her voice was small. "I do. I was being ridiculous." "And you threatened to report me to the HOA board for not enabling that ridiculous decision." "I know. I am sorry, Oliver. I really am." I nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you for saying that. Just remember this the next time you think about pulling rank over something trivial." "Yeah, I will." I got back on my snowmobile and continued my rounds. The rest of the morning was uneventful, just checking on people and making sure everyone was safe. By the time I made it back to my house around noon, the plows had finally started making their way through the main roads. I figured that was the end of it. Patricia had apologized, sort of, and maybe she would think twice before making unreasonable demands in the future. But I should have known better. Patricia Hendricks did not become vice president of the HOA by letting things go. 2 days later, after the roads were clear and life had mostly returned to normal, I found a notice in my mailbox. It was from the HOA, summoning me to an emergency meeting to discuss my conduct during the recent weather emergency. I read through it twice, not quite believing what I was seeing. According to the notice, which was signed by Patricia, I was being accused of failing to assist a neighbor in need and creating a hostile environment within the community. The meeting was scheduled for the following evening at the community center. I called Dennis immediately. "Dennis, what the hell is this?" I know. I tried to stop her, Oliver. I really did. But she went over my head and contacted the other board members directly. She convinced them that this was a serious matter that needed to be addressed. "This is insane." She apologized to me. She admitted she was being ridiculous. She what? Dennis sounded genuinely surprised. 2 days ago, when I delivered her medication, she said she overreacted and that she was sorry. She did not mention that to the board. She told us you were being hostile and unhelpful, and that your refusal to assist her put her in danger. I felt anger rising in my chest. Dennis, she wanted my snowmobile to go shopping during a level 3 snow emergency. After I told her no, she threatened to report me to the HOA, and now she is doing exactly that, even though she admitted I was right. Look, just come to the meeting tomorrow. Explain your side of things. I am on your side here, but I am only one vote on the board. Who else is on the board besides you and Patricia? Margaret Reeves and Tom Kowalski. Margaret usually sides with Patricia on most things, but Tom is pretty reasonable. If you explain what actually happened, I think we can shut this down. Fine, I will be there. But this is absolutely ridiculous. The next evening, I showed up at the community center to find it more packed than I expected. Word had apparently spread about the meeting, and at least a dozen neighbors were there to watch the proceedings. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, looking smug and satisfied. Dennis called the meeting to order and explained the situation. "We are here tonight to discuss a complaint filed by Patricia Hendricks regarding Oliver Sanders and an incident that occurred during the recent snowstorm. Patricia, would you like to present your case?" Patricia stood up, smoothing down her blouse. "Thank you, Dennis. As you all know, we recently experienced a severe winter storm that left many of us trapped in our homes. During this emergency, I approached my neighbor Oliver Sanders, who owns a snowmobile, and asked if he could assist me in getting to the store for essential supplies. I noticed she conveniently left out the cheese and almond milk. Oliver refused to help me," she continued. "Despite the fact that our HOA bylaws clearly state that residents should assist one another in times of need, his refusal was not just unhelpful, it was hostile. He made me feel small and insignificant, like my needs did not matter. This is exactly the kind of behavior that creates a toxic community environment." She sat down, and several people in the audience murmured. Margaret Reeves was nodding along sympathetically. Dennis looked at me. "Oliver, would you like to respond?" I stood up, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. "Patricia is leaving out some important details. She did ask to use my snowmobile, but it was not for essential supplies. She specifically told me she wanted to go buy cheese that was on sale and organic almond milk. She admitted to me that this was not an actual emergency, just a shopping trip she did not want to miss." Patricia's face went red. "I did not say that." "You absolutely did. You told me the store was having a sale on imported cheese that ended that day, and you refused to miss it. Those were your exact words." "You are lying," Patricia said, her voice rising. "I am not lying. You also have zero experience operating a snowmobile, and you wanted to take it out during a level 3 snow emergency when nobody was supposed to be on the roads unless absolutely necessary. As someone who has used snowmobiles for years, including in my capacity as a postal worker, I made the judgment call that lending you my equipment for a non-emergency would be dangerous and irresponsible. You are a postal worker? Margaret asked, looking confused. Yes. I am the rural carrier for this area. I have been delivering mail to every house in this subdivision for the past 5 years, including to Patricia. Tom Kowalski leaned forward. Hold on. You delivered mail during the storm. I did wellness checks on the second day, once conditions were safe enough. I also delivered emergency medications, including a prescription to Patricia's house. During that delivery, Patricia actually apologized to me and admitted she had overreacted about the snowmobile. All eyes turned to Patricia, who looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Is that true, Patricia? Dennis asked. I may have said something to that effect, she said carefully, but I was under duress. I had just received important medication and I was not thinking clearly. You were under duress, I said, incredulous. You were standing in your doorway, perfectly safe, after I went out of my way to make sure you got your prescription during a blizzard, and you apologized because you realized you were wrong. I think we are getting off track here, Patricia said quickly. The point is that Oliver violated HOA bylaws by refusing to help a neighbor. Actually, Tom said, pulling out a copy of the bylaws, I have been reading through these. Section 7, Article 3 does say residents should help one another, but it also includes a clause about reasonable assistance. I do not think asking to borrow someone's snowmobile for shopping qualifies as reasonable, especially during a state of emergency. Thank you, I said. That was exactly my thinking. Margaret still looked uncertain, but Patricia, you said this was for essential supplies. Cheese and almond milk, I repeated. During a Level 3 snow emergency, when the governor had declared a state of emergency and told everyone to stay off the roads. I needed those supplies, Patricia insisted. No, you wanted them. There is a difference. I turned to address the whole board. Look, I understand that HOAs have rules and I respect that, but those rules have to be applied reasonably. Patricia has a pattern of using her position to try to force people to do things they are not obligated to do. This was not an emergency. It was a shopping trip. And I am not going to apologize for refusing to enable behavior that could have gotten someone hurt or killed. Dennis nodded. I think Oliver makes a fair point. Patricia, do you have any other evidence or witnesses to support your claim that this was an actual emergency? Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. I should not have to justify my needs to anyone. If I say it is an emergency, it is an emergency. That is not how it works, Tom said firmly. We cannot just declare anything we want to be an emergency and then compel our neighbors to comply. That is not what the HOA is for. Exactly, Dennis agreed. Patricia, I think you filed this complaint in bad faith. Oliver was right to refuse, and from what he is saying, you actually agreed with him at the time. I did not agree with him, Patricia snapped. You apologized to him, Dennis countered. That is pretty much an admission that you were wrong. The meeting devolved from there, with Patricia arguing that her apology had been coerced, and me pointing out that nobody had forced her to say anything. After about 20 minutes of back and forth, Dennis finally called for a vote. All in favor of finding Oliver Sanders in violation of HOA bylaws. Only Patricia and Margaret raised their hands. All opposed, Dennis and Tom raised their hands. Motion fails. This complaint is dismissed. Dennis banged his gavel, which was actually just a regular hammer he kept for these meetings. Oliver, you are free to go, and I apologize for wasting your time. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. But before I could leave, Patricia stood up again. This is not over, she said, pointing at me. I will not be treated this way in my own community. Patricia, the board has made its decision, Dennis said firmly. You need to let this go. No, I will not let this go. Oliver Sanders has made my life difficult since he moved here, and I am tired of it. I stared at her. I have made your life difficult. Patricia, I deliver your mail. That is the extent of our interaction. Every problem we have had has been because you started it. You are always parking your postal truck in front of my house. I am delivering your mail. That is where your mailbox is. You leave tire tracks on my lawn. That has never happened. I have never driven on your lawn. You make too much noise in the morning. I deliver mail at 10 in the morning. That is not early. She was spiraling now, throwing out accusations that made no sense. The other people in the room were starting to look uncomfortable, and even Margaret was looking at Patricia with concern. Patricia, Dennis said gently, I think you need to take a breath. Do not tell me to take a breath, she snapped. I am the vice president of this HOA, and I will not be disrespected like this. Nobody is disrespecting you, I said. We are just asking you to be reasonable. Reasonable, reasonable. Her voice was getting louder. I asked for one simple favor, and you turned it into this whole production. You could have just let me use your stupid snowmobile, but instead, you had to make a big deal out of it and embarrass me in front of everyone. You embarrassed yourself, Patricia. I just refused to participate in something dangerous and stupid. That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Patricia's face went from red to purple, and she grabbed her water bottle from the table and threw it at me. It missed, sailing past my head and hitting the wall behind me with a wet thud. The room went silent. Dennis stood up slowly. Patricia, I think you need to go home. No, I am not going anywhere. I am on this board and I have every right to be here. You just threw something at another resident during an official HOA meeting. That is assault. You need to leave now. I did not assault anyone. The bottle did not even hit him. That does not matter, Tom said, standing up as well. You attempted to assault him. That is grounds for immediate removal from this meeting. You cannot remove me. I am the vice president. We can and we are, Dennis said. Security. Could you please escort Miss Hendricks out? Our community had a part-time security guard, an older gentleman named Frank who mostly just made sure the pool was locked at night. He looked extremely uncomfortable, but he walked over to Patricia and gestured toward the door. Madam, I am going to have to ask you to leave. Do not touch me, Patricia hissed. I will sue you. I will sue all of you. Patricia, please do not make this worse, Dennis said, but Patricia was beyond reasoning. She shook off Frank's hand and stormed toward the exit, but not before stopping in front of me one more time. This is your fault, she said, her voice low and venomous. All of this is your fault. I will make you regret moving into this neighborhood. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Finally, Dennis cleared his throat. Well, that was unfortunate. Oliver again, I am very sorry you had to deal with that. It is okay, I said, though my heart was still pounding. Is she always like this? Not usually this bad, Tom admitted. She can be difficult, but I have never seen her lose it like that before. The meeting wrapped up shortly after, and I headed home, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. I had expected Patricia to be upset, but I had not expected her to completely melt down in front of everyone. Over the next few days, things seemed to calm down. Patricia avoided me whenever I was delivering mail, and she stopped attending the weekly neighborhood walks that several residents organized. Dennis called me to apologize again, and to let me know that the board was discussing what to do about Patricia's behavior. Then, about a week after the meeting, things took an even stranger turn. I was finishing up my mail route on a Thursday afternoon when I noticed something odd. Patricia's mailbox, which was usually empty by the time I got there in the morning since she always checked it right away, was stuffed full. I could see several days' worth of mail crammed inside, including some packages that had been sitting there so long the boxes were starting to sag from moisture. I frowned and pulled up to her house. Something was not right. Patricia was obsessive about her mail. She had complained to me multiple times about wanting it delivered earlier in the day because she did not like waiting. There was no way she would let it pile up like this. I walked up to her front door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Now I was starting to get worried. I walked around to her back door and peered through the window. Everything looked normal inside, no signs of a struggle or anything concerning, but there was also no sign of Patricia. I called Dennis. "Hey Oliver, what is up?" "Dennis, have you heard from Patricia in the past few days?" "No, actually. She was supposed to come to a board meeting on Tuesday, but she did not show up." "Why?" "Her mail has been piling up for at least 3 days, maybe more. She is not answering her door or her phone." "I am at her house now and I am getting worried." "That is not like her at all. Should we call the police for a wellness check?" "Yeah, I think so. Better safe than sorry." Dennis said he would make the call, and I waited outside Patricia's house. About 15 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy pulled up. I explained the situation, and he tried knocking and calling out as well. When there was no response, he made the decision to force entry. We found Patricia in her bathroom, unconscious on the floor. She had apparently slipped getting out of the shower and hit her head on the sink. The deputy immediately called for an ambulance while I checked for a pulse. She was alive, but her pulse was weak, and she was badly dehydrated. The paramedics arrived within minutes and loaded her onto a stretcher. As they were taking her out, one of them asked me how long I thought she had been there. Based on her mail, probably 3 days, maybe longer. "That is a long time. She is lucky you found her when you did." They rushed her to the hospital and I followed in my truck. Dennis met me there, along with a few other neighbors who had heard what happened. Patricia was in the ICU for 2 days before she woke up. The doctors said she had a severe concussion and was dangerously dehydrated. Another day or two and it could have been fatal. I visited her on the 3rd day, after Dennis told me she was asking for me. She looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to various monitors and IVs. Her usual perfect hair was matted and messy, and the dark circles under her eyes made her look 10 years older. "Oliver," she said when she saw me. Her voice was raspy and weak. "They told me you found me." "I did. Your mail was piling up, which was not like you, so I got worried and called it in." "I do not remember much. I was getting ready for the day and then I woke up here." "You slipped in your bathroom, hit your head pretty hard." She closed her eyes. "The doctors said I would have died if you had not found me." "I was just doing my job. I notice when people's patterns change, and you not collecting your mail was a big red flag. After everything I did to you, you still saved my life." I pulled up a chair and sat down. "Patricia, despite our differences, I would never want something bad to happen to you. I am a mail carrier. Part of my job is looking out for the people on my route." "I have been horrible to you," she said, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I have been horrible to everyone. I do not know why I am like this." I did not know what to say to that, so I just sat there while she cried. After a minute, she wiped her eyes and looked at me directly. "I am going to resign from the HOA board. You deserve better than having to deal with my nonsense, and so does everyone else in the neighborhood. You do not have to do that." "Yes, I do. I have been using that position to make myself feel important, to feel like I have control over something. But all I have done is make people miserable. I see that now. Patricia, I think you just need to take a step back and reassess your priorities. Nobody is asking you to quit the board. Actually, they are." Dennis came by yesterday and told me that the board voted to remove me for my behavior at that meeting. The bottle throwing was the last straw. I had not known that, but I could not say I was surprised. What they do not know is that I am also going through a divorce, she continued. My husband left me 4 months ago. He got tired of my controlling behavior and I do not blame him. I have been taking out all my anger and frustration on everyone around me and it is not fair. I am sorry to hear that. Do not be. It was my own fault, just like all of this. She gestured at the hospital room. I have spent so much time trying to control everything and everyone that I pushed away the people who actually cared about me. And when I really needed help, when I was lying on that bathroom floor, I had nobody to call because I had alienated everyone. We talked for a while longer and I started to see a different side of Patricia. Underneath all the bravado and the power trips was someone who was deeply unhappy and did not know how to fix it. I actually felt sorry for her. Over the next few weeks, Patricia slowly recovered. She moved out of her house in Meadowbrook Hills and got an apartment closer to downtown Bozeman. She did officially resign from the HOA board, and Dennis told me that she sent a letter of apology to all the residents for her behavior during her tenure. I ran into her one day at the grocery store, about a month after she left the neighborhood. She looked different, more relaxed somehow. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer outfits, and her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Oliver," she said when she saw me. "How are you?" "I am good. How are you feeling?" "Better. Much better, actually. I started seeing a therapist to work through some of my issues. It has been really helpful." "That is great, Patricia. I am glad you are doing well. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. Saving my life, I mean. I know I never really said it properly." "You do not have to keep thanking me. I am just glad you are okay." She smiled, and it was genuine. "I also wanted to apologize." "Really apologize, not just the half-hearted thing I did before. I was awful to you and you did not deserve any of it. I appreciate that, and I accept your apology. I am working on being a better person. It is not easy, but I am trying. That is all anyone can ask for." We chatted for a few more minutes before going our separate ways. As I watched her walk off down the aisle, I felt a strange sense of closure. The whole situation had been bizarre and frustrating, but in a weird way, it had ended up helping someone who really needed it. Life in Meadowbrook Hills went back to normal after Patricia left. Dennis continued as HOA president, and they elected a new vice president, a retired teacher named Carol, who was much more reasonable and level-headed. The neighborhood meetings became actually productive instead of just being platforms for complaints and power plays. I continued my mail route, checking on my residents and making sure everyone got their packages and letters. The winter eventually gave way to spring, and the snow that had caused so much trouble melted away. One day in early April, I found a card in my own mailbox. It was from Patricia. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for reminding me that being a good neighbor means actually caring about people, not just enforcing rules. I hope someday I can be the kind of person who helps others the way you helped me." I put the card on my refrigerator, where it stayed for a long time. The whole experience taught me something important about people. Sometimes the ones who seem the most difficult are actually the ones who are struggling the most. Patricia had been drowning in her own unhappiness, and she had lashed out at everyone around her because she did not know what else to do. I am not saying her behavior was excusable. She was out of line, and she needed to face consequences for her actions. But I am glad that, ultimately, something good came out of it. She got the help she needed, and I like to think that maybe I played a small part in that. A few months later, I was at the community center for the annual summer barbecue. Dennis was manning the grill, and most of the neighborhood had turned out for the event. It was a beautiful day, sunny and warm, perfect for being outside. Tom Kowalski came up to me with a beer in his hand. "Oliver, I have been meaning to tell you something." "What is up?" "After everything that happened with Patricia, the board voted to give you an award. We are calling it the Good Neighbor Award, and you are the first recipient." I laughed. "You do not have to do that. We want to." "What you did, not just finding Patricia, but the way you handled that whole situation with patience and professionalism. It was exactly the kind of behavior we want to encourage in this community. Plus, we figured after all the grief she gave you, you deserved some recognition." They presented me with a plaque later that evening in front of everyone at the barbecue. It was a little embarrassing, but also kind of nice. Dennis made a speech about community values and looking out for one another, and people actually seemed to mean it when they applauded. As I stood there holding my plaque, looking around at all my neighbors, I realized something. This was what HOAs were supposed to be about. Not about enforcing petty rules or wielding tiny amounts of power over people, but about building a real community where people genuinely cared about each other. Patricia had lost sight of that, but maybe her downfall had helped the rest of us remember it. I kept doing my mail route, day in and day out, through that summer and into the next fall. I got to know my residents even better, learned their habits and their schedules, noticed when something was off. I helped Mrs. Morrison set up her new computer, taught the Johnson kids about stamp collecting, and even helped Dennis install a new mailbox when his old one got hit by a snowplow. Every now and then, I would get an email from Patricia. She had moved to Billings for a fresh start, gotten a job at a nonprofit helping women going through divorces. She seemed happy, or at least happier than she had been. She told me she had made some real friends, people who accepted her for who she was, not for any position or status she held. She also told me she had started volunteering at the post office in Billings, helping seniors learn how to use the automated mailing machines. I figured if I was going to turn over a new leaf, I should probably learn to appreciate postal workers, she wrote. They do not get enough credit for what they do. That made me smile. Winter came around again, and with it more snow. But this time, when the storms hit, I did not have anyone demanding to borrow my snowmobile for cheese runs. Instead, I had neighbors checking on each other, making sure everyone had what they needed, actually coming together as a community should. Dennis and I established a phone tree for the neighborhood so that during bad weather, we could quickly check in with everyone and make sure nobody was in trouble. Mrs. Morrison became the captain of our section, and she took her duties very seriously, calling everyone on her list every time snow was in the forecast. The whole Patricia situation had taught the neighborhood something valuable. We had seen what happened when someone fell through the cracks, when nobody noticed they needed help. We were determined not to let that happen again. One snowy evening in December, almost a year after the original incident, I was sitting in my living room watching the snow fall when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello, Oliver. This is Patricia." I sat up straighter. "Patricia, hi, how are you?" "I am good, really good actually. I am calling because I wanted to let you know I am getting remarried." "That is wonderful, congratulations." "Thank you." His name is Robert, and he is nothing like my ex-husband. He is kind and patient, and he actually listens to me. We met at the nonprofit where I work. I am really happy for you, Patricia. I wanted to invite you to the wedding. I know that might seem strange, but you were there for me at my lowest point, and I would not be where I am now without you. I would be honored if you could come. I was surprised, but touched. I would love to come. It is going to be a small ceremony, just close friends and family. It is in March in Billings. I will send you the details. Sounds perfect. Oliver, I also wanted to tell you that I am writing a book about my experiences, about how I let power and control take over my life and how I almost died because of it. My therapist thought it might be helpful for other people who struggle with similar issues. That is amazing, Patricia. I think that could help a lot of people. I hope so. And I want to include your story about how you saved my life even though I had treated you terribly. Would that be okay? Of course. If you think it will help people, then absolutely. We talked for a while longer, catching up on everything that had happened over the past year. By the time we hung up, I was feeling good about how things had turned out. It was not the ending I would have predicted when Patricia first showed up at my door demanding my snowmobile, but it was a good ending nonetheless. I did go to her wedding in March. It was held at a small chapel in Billings, with maybe 30 people in attendance. Patricia looked genuinely happy, radiant even, and Robert seemed like a good man. During the reception, she pulled me aside and thanked me again. I mean it, Oliver. You saved my life in more ways than one. Not just physically, but you showed me that there were still good people in the world, people who would help even when they did not have to. That gave me hope that I could change too. You did the hard work yourself, Patricia. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Maybe. But I still would not be here without you. I stayed for the whole reception, dancing with some of the other guests and enjoying the celebration. It was surreal to think that less than 2 years ago, this same woman had been my antagonist, making my life difficult and filing complaints against me. Now here we were, celebrating her new beginning. As I drove back to Bozeman that night, I thought about all the twists and turns life could take. I had moved to Montana for the postal job, looking for a quieter life than what I had in Missoula. I had bought a house in what seemed like a nice subdivision, not knowing that I would end up in conflict with the HOA vice president over a snowmobile. But that conflict had led to something meaningful. It had exposed problems that needed to be addressed, both in Patricia's life and in how the HOA functioned. It had brought the neighborhood together in a way that never would have happened otherwise. Sometimes the most difficult people in our lives end up teaching us the most important lessons. Back in Meadowbrook Hills, life continued its steady rhythm. I delivered mail 6 days a week, rain or shine, snow or sleet. I got to know new residents as they moved in, said goodbye to old ones as they moved away. The neighborhood evolved and changed, but the sense of community that we had built after Patricia's departure remained strong. Dennis served 3 more years as HOA president before stepping down and letting Carol take over. The new board was focused on actual community building rather than rule enforcement. They organized more social events, started a neighborhood watch program that was actually about safety rather than spying on people, and even put together an emergency preparedness committee to make sure we were all ready for the next big storm. My snowmobile continued to sit in my garage, ready for emergencies but never demanded for cheese runs. Mrs. Morrison checked on it every time she came over, worried that it might not start when I needed it. I appreciated her concern. The Postal Service recognized me for my years of service, giving me an award for community engagement. It was nice to be appreciated, though I always felt like I was just doing my job. Noticing when someone's mail piled up, checking on people who might be in trouble, that was all part of being a rural carrier. About 3 years after the whole incident, I got a package in the mail. It was from Patricia, and inside was a copy of her book. It was called The Control Trap: How I Lost Everything and Found Myself Again. On the first page, she had written an inscription, To Oliver, the postal carrier who delivered more than just mail, thank you for everything. I read the book in one sitting. She was brutally honest about her behavior, about how her need for control had destroyed her marriage and her relationships. She wrote about the snowmobile incident in detail, not sparing herself any criticism. She described lying on her bathroom floor, thinking she was going to die alone, and how that moment of clarity had changed everything. The last chapter was about her recovery and her new life. She wrote about therapy, about learning to let go, about building genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. And she wrote about the importance of community, of having people who notice when something is wrong, who care enough to check in. It was a good book. I hoped it would help people. I put it on my shelf next to my postal service manuals and the various awards I had received over the years. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded that people can change, that even the most difficult person can find redemption if they are willing to do the work. The seasons continued to cycle through Montana, bringing hot summers and cold winters, beautiful springs and colorful falls. My route never changed much, just the occasional new house or moved family. But the people I delivered to became like an extended family, and I looked forward to seeing them each day one winter morning. About 5 years after that first snowmobile encounter, I was delivering mail when I saw a moving truck at Patricia's old house. A young family was moving in, a couple with 2 small kids and a friendly golden retriever. I introduced myself, welcomed them to the neighborhood, and explained the mail delivery schedule. The wife, whose name was Amy, asked if I had any advice for getting involved in the community. Join the HOA, I said. I know that sounds strange, but we have a really good board now. They focus on building community rather than enforcing petty rules. It is a good way to meet your neighbors. That is good to hear, she said. We were worried about HOA drama. Our last neighborhood had some issues with that. We did too for a while, but we worked through it. This is a good place now. As I drove away from that house, I thought about how far things had come. The house that had once been a source of conflict was now welcoming a new family, one that would hopefully have a much better experience than Patricia did. That evening, Dennis called me with news. Oliver, I just heard from Patricia. She got a publishing deal for her second book. That is fantastic. What is this one about? Apparently it is about HOAs, about how they can either build communities or destroy them. She wants to interview some of us for it, get our perspectives on what happened and how we turned things around. I would be happy to talk to her. She also mentioned something else. She is working with a nonprofit to develop training materials for HOA boards to help them focus on community building instead of power trips. She thinks a lot of the problems in neighborhoods across America come from people like she used to be, and she wants to help fix it. I smiled. That is really great, Dennis. I am glad she found her purpose. A few weeks later, Patricia did call me for the interview. We talked for over an hour about everything that had happened, about the lessons we had all learned, about how the neighborhood had changed for the better. She was engaged and thoughtful, asking good questions and really listening to the answers. At the end of the call, she said something that stuck with me. You know, Oliver, that snowmobile incident was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not the falling and hitting my head part, obviously, but the conflict, the consequences, the wake-up call. It forced me to take a hard look at who I had become, and I did not like what I saw. So thank you for standing your ground that day. If you had just given me the snowmobile, I probably would have continued down that path until something even worse happened. I am glad something good came out of it, I said, though I wish it had not required you almost dying. Sometimes that is what it takes. Some of us need to hit rock bottom before we can start climbing back up. Her second book came out the following year, and it was even more successful than the first one. HOA boards across the country started using it as a resource, and Patricia became something of an expert on community building. She did speaking engagements and consulted with neighborhoods that were struggling with internal conflicts. She always mentioned Meadowbrook Hills as an example of a community that had overcome its problems. Dennis and I both appeared in the book, along with several other residents. It was strange to see our little subdivision become a case study for successful community transformation. The book led to some media attention. A local news station did a feature on our neighborhood, interviewing residents about how things had changed. They interviewed me too, asking about my role in the whole situation. "I was just doing my job," I told the reporter. "Postal carriers are often the eyes and ears of a neighborhood. We notice patterns, we see when something is off." In Patricia's case, her mail piling up was a red flag that something was wrong. The story went semi-viral online, with people sharing it as a feel-good tale about community and redemption. My phone rang with interview requests from various outlets, but I turned most of them down. I was not interested in being famous. I just wanted to deliver mail and live my life. But I did do one more interview for a postal service publication. They wanted to highlight the important role rural carriers play in their communities, and they thought my story was a good example. I agreed because I hoped it might encourage other carriers to be vigilant and look out for their residents. Years passed. I got older, my hair started to gray, but I kept delivering mail. It was what I knew, what I was good at, and I genuinely enjoyed it. Every day was different, bringing new challenges and new opportunities to help people. Patricia and I stayed in touch, exchanging emails every few months and occasional phone calls. She continued her work with nonprofits and community organizations. Robert, her husband, was supportive of her mission, and they seemed genuinely happy together. Eventually, I started training younger carriers, passing on the knowledge I had accumulated over 2 decades with the Postal Service. I taught them about more than just delivering mail. I taught them about community, about paying attention, about being the kind of person people could rely on. "Your job is not just about getting packages from point A to point B," I would tell them. "It is about being part of the fabric of the community. You are going to see things other people do not see. You are going to notice patterns. And sometimes, you are going to be in a position to help someone who really needs it. Do not take that responsibility lightly." Some of them got it, some did not. But I tried my best to pass on what I had learned, both from my successes and my challenges. The Meadowbrook Hills subdivision continued to thrive. Property values went up, not because we had strict HOA rules, but because we had built a genuine community where people wanted to live. New families moved in, attracted by stories of neighborliness and support. We had become what Patricia had always claimed to want, a desirable, well-functioning neighborhood. The irony was that we achieved it by doing the opposite of what she had tried to do. Instead of control and enforcement, we built it on mutual respect and genuine care for one another. On the 10th anniversary of the snowmobile incident, the neighborhood threw a party. It was Carol's idea, a celebration of how far we had come as a community. Patricia flew in from Billings as a special guest, and the whole neighborhood turned out for the event. It was held at the community center, decorated with photos from the past decade showing various neighborhood events and milestones. There was even a picture of my old snowmobile, which got a good laugh from everyone who remembered the original incident. Patricia gave a speech, talking about her journey from antagonist to advocate. She was poised and confident, Nothing like the angry, controlling woman who had knocked on my door all those years ago. "I stand before you as proof that people can change," she said. "10 years ago, I was the worst kind of neighbor. I was controlling, petty, and I used my position on the HOA board to make people miserable. I thought that was what leadership looked like. I was wrong." She looked directly at me. "Oliver Sanders refused to enable my bad behavior. He said no when I made an unreasonable demand, and he stood by that decision even when I tried to use my authority against him. That might seem like a small thing, but it was not. It was the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately saved my life and helped me become the person I am today." People applauded, and I felt a lump in my throat. This was not about me being a hero. This was about a community that had learned and grown together, that had faced a challenge and come out stronger for it. After the speech, people mingled and shared stories. Mrs. Morrison told me she was proud of me, patting my arm with her wrinkled hand. The Johnsons, whose kids were now teenagers, thanked me for always being a steady presence in the neighborhood. Even Frank, the security guard who had escorted Patricia out of that fateful meeting, came up to shake my hand. "That was the strangest night of my career," he said with a laugh. "But it all worked out in the end." As the party was winding down, Patricia pulled me aside one more time. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. I opened it to find a framed photo. It was of a snowmobile, but not mine. This one was newer, shinier. "That is the snowmobile I bought for the Billings Community Emergency Response Team," Patricia explained. "I donated it in your honor. There is a plaque on it that says, in recognition of Oliver Sanders, who understood that true service means knowing when to say yes and when to say no." I did not know what to say. "Patricia, this is too much." "It is not enough," she said firmly. "You gave me my life back, Oliver. The least I can do is make sure other communities have the resources they need for emergencies." We stood there for a moment. Two people who had started as adversaries and ended as something like friends. Life was strange that way, full of unexpected turns and unlikely connections. As I drove home that night, past familiar houses and sleeping mailboxes, I reflected on everything that had happened. A simple refusal to lend out my snowmobile had spiraled into a neighborhood drama, a near-death experience, a transformation, and ultimately, a stronger community. I had not set out to be anyone's hero or anyone's teacher. I had just been a postal carrier trying to do his job and live his life. But somehow, that had been enough. The next morning, I woke up early as always, put on my postal uniform, and headed out to my truck. The mail had to be delivered, same as every day. That was the beauty of this job. No matter what happened, no matter how much drama or excitement or change occurred, the mail always had to go through. I loaded up my truck and started my route, the familiar streets of Meadowbrook Hills stretching out before me. As I drove past Patricia's old house, I saw the young family's kids playing in the yard, their golden retriever running circles around them. They waved at me, and I waved back. This was why I did what I did. Not for recognition or awards or books written about me, but for moments like this, for being part of something bigger than myself, for contributing to the daily rhythm of a community that had learned to take care of its own. The years would continue to pass. I would eventually retire, hand over my route to someone new, and move into the next phase of my life. But I would always remember these times, these people, this neighborhood that had taught me so much about human nature and redemption and the power of community. And somewhere, my snowmobile would sit ready in my garage, a symbol of that strange day when I said no to a Karen who demanded it for a grocery run, not knowing that she would later become someone I genuinely respected. That was the real lesson in all of this. People are not their worst moments. Patricia Hendricks was not just the angry HOA vice president who threw a water bottle at a neighborhood meeting. She was also the woman who found the courage to change, to admit she was wrong, to rebuild her life from the ground up. And me. I was not just the postal carrier who refused to lend out his equipment. I was someone who cared enough about his community to notice when someone was in trouble, even when that someone had been making my life difficult. We are all more complex than we appear, carrying our own struggles and stories. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us of that, to break through the walls we build and reveal our shared humanity. As I finished my route that day and headed back to the post office, I felt grateful. Grateful for the job I loved, the community I served, and even for the challenges that had made me better at both. The mail would continue. Life would continue. And somewhere in Montana, a former HOA Karen was out there making the world a little bit better, one community at a time. That seemed like a pretty good ending to me.